Okay, so it is just 4 o'clock now, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you to everybody who's joining us today for our webinar this afternoon with Dr. Robin Buckley, applying a business framework to our current or future relationships. For those who don't know me, I'm Julie Fortin, a partner and wealth manager here at North Star Financial Planning. And before we get started, just a few housekeeping items, as they say. This webinar will be about a half an hour long, and we'll be doing questions at the end. So feel free to post any questions you may have into the chat throughout the presentation, and we'll be sure to answer all of those at the end. So it is my pleasure to introduce everybody to Dr. Robin Buckley. Dr. Buckley helps high-achieving clients thrive in their careers and relationships. She's an author, professional speaker, and cognitive behavioral coach who works with executives and high-performance couples. Her proprietary coaching model uses a business framework and cognitive behavioral strategies to support clients in creating and executing concrete strategic plans for developing their careers and relationships. She is the owner of Insights Group Psychological and Coaching Services. Dr. Buckley has a PhD in clinical psychology from Hofstra University, and she has published 3 books, including Voices from the Village, Advice for Girls on the Verge of Adulthood, and her new children's book regarding anxiety called The Thinking Spot. Dr. Buckley is a columnist for Entrepreneur.com, and her 2022 TEDx talk was just released last week. Dr. Buckley, it's wonderful to have you here today. I'm really excited for your talk.
Julie, thank you so much. And thank you for all of you who are on this call for our conversation. So to start, I want to just do a quick overview of what you're going to walk away with. And Julie will show you the overview slide. Essentially, what I want to explain to you today is first and foremost the difference between couples therapy and couples coaching, because there are some essential differences that are important to know as we frame this conversation around a business strategy for your relationship. Once you understand that, we're going to take a deep dive into some of the things that you can actually do or choose to do within your current relationship or a future relationship to really create an objective strategic plan for your relationship. So those are the essential pieces. And one thing that I will say is you might want to grab a piece of paper or pen before we begin, because there might be a couple things that you want to jot down as you go and that I might ask you to do as the talk progresses. So I look forward to your questions at the end, and away we go. So I want you to start by thinking about the last trip that you took. How did it start? Did you randomly dive right in, getting in your car or going to the airport with no idea where you were going? Did you just fill a bag packed with all kinds of clothes for all kinds of weather because you weren't sure where you'd end up? Well, this might sound like a fun way to travel for some people. It has a higher likelihood of confusion or just general dissatisfaction with the trip. For most of us, we make a plan when we go on a trip. I know when I go on a trip, I make a list of the places that we want to go, the things that we're going to do, and definitely the items that we have to pack. We put a lot of time into planning our trips to make them as happy and as satisfying as possible. And I'm guessing this isn't the only area of your life where you created a plan to make sure you achieve success. We do the same in our careers. We establish goals and timelines and deadlines. We collect data regarding the goals and do reviews of our progress. Again, we have a plan. And certainly, if you are on this webinar, we have to mention finances because it's apropos to our host for the webinar. My assumption is that those of you here have a financial plan, likely with one of the amazing professionals here at North Star. But why bother? Why not just see what happens with your money and see if you end up having enough money for all the things you want to do in your life? I can hear Julie cringing in the background. Again, the answer is simple. The stakes are too high to do that, and you want to ensure the best possible success for your finances. So, I have one simple question for you. Why don't most couples make a plan for their relationship? Consider this. The average couple in America spends about $25,000 $100,000 and approximately 250 hours planning their wedding. Maybe some of you on this call did just that, or participated in weddings that did just that. Most weddings last about 5 hours between the ceremony and the reception. So let's do some quick math. This means the couple pays $5,000 and spends 50 hours for each 1 hour of their wedding day. Think about that. If the couple planned their 50 or more year marriage in the same way they planned their wedding, based on this math, they would spend over 100 million hours, about 12 years, and over $2 billion planning their life together. Now, of course, this is ridiculous, but it begs the question of why couples don't put in at least a fraction of this effort in planning their marriage as they do for their one day of their wedding. I mean, we plan our trips to avoid disappointment. We plan our finances to avoid poverty. So why don't we plan our marriages to avoid divorce? I'll let you mull that one over. So when I talk about the idea of creating a business plan for a relationship, the first question I usually get asked is whether this is couples therapy. And on this next slide, I'll show you the differences, because it isn't. Couples therapy is first and foremost going to be for individuals who are in crisis. So this could include things like a recent addiction, recent abuse, loss of a significant family member, or infidelity. But it also could mean a couple who are in the process of deciding about divorce. In couples therapy, there's often a focus on what has gone wrong in the past and a deep dive into those issues. And this can be very emotional and very painful. And it's often the reason that I hear from people that their partner is hesitant to do therapy, or both of them are hesitant to come in for therapy. Therapy often occurs as an intervention for crisis. Now, sometimes that is absolutely necessary, but for a lot of couples who are just dissatisfied with their relationship or who want to be happier, couples coaching might be a better option. Now, some of you might be familiar with coaching from a life coaching or executive coaching perspective, and these are focused on the individual. Couples coaching, which is a newer perspective, focuses on the relationship. The coaching sessions involve discussions on where the couple is in the present and what they want their relationship to be in the future. So there isn't a deep dive into the past. And very often I tell my clients that that's not necessary in couples coaching because you can't change the past. So unless there is some significant issue that is needed to get through a crisis, focusing on the past can't be changed. So we focus on where the couple is now and where they want to be in the future. It also doesn't focus just on the challenges that the couple is having. It focuses and utilizes the strengths that are in that relationship. So unlike therapy, couples coaching tends to be a preventative and proactive perspective. And using that, we can build a business plan for the relationship. So there are typically 3 types of couples who come in for couples coaching, and you might see yourself within one of these couples, either currently or possibly in the future. The first is a couple who might be in a rut. They aren't as happy as they used to be. They're not as satisfied in their relationship as they want to be, and they just want it to be better. Very often these couples will come into session and they'll say things like, we just want to get back to where we used to be. But there's no going back in couples coaching because we don't want to go back and backward in our relationship. We want to keep moving forward in the relationship. So that's how we frame it for those couples. The second type of couple who might choose couples coaching might be at the start of a commitment. So getting engaged, getting married, about to move in together. And they use couples coaching to avoid mistakes that they've made in past relationships or to avoid the mistakes that they've watched friends and family make that they don't want to make. So they come into couples coaching to create a plan to avoid that. The final couple that tends to utilize coaching is a couple experiencing a transition. So things like having a new baby or the last kid going off to college. Some couples might come in when there's going to be a new job change or a new move, or when they're about to go into retirement. They're looking for strategies to navigate the change and make sure it doesn't negatively affect the relationship. Again, you see in all these examples that couples are trying to take that preventative, proactive measure to create the relationship that they want. So now that you understand the difference between couples therapy and couples coaching, and knowing we're going to frame it around this perspective and platform of couples coaching, I'm going to ask you to do a two-part analysis. And this is where having your pen and paper ready is really going to be handy. The first analysis, or the first part of the analysis, is going to be a self-analysis. So I am asking you to write down your strengths or your skills as a professional. And this could be in a career role or a volunteer role. I essentially want you to consider, what are the things you do or did well in your professional role? What are or were the things that made you really effective? So I'm going to give you 1 minute to do this self-analysis of the skills that made you effective in past or current professional roles. You have about 20 more seconds to jot down any additional thoughts about your strengths and skills. So when you look at the list you created, how many of those professional strengths and skills do you use in your relationship? Too often, people believe they need to reinvent new strategies to improve their relationship. And I am not a big advocate of reinventing the wheel. Why not apply the things you do well in your professional role to your relationship? Let me give you an example. A client I worked with recently is a CFO for a successful manufacturing firm. During one coaching session, she was telling me about a pretty heated argument that she had had with her husband around the topic of their money, which I'm sure Julie can agree with is a pretty common source of stress for many couples. She said that they were misaligned in how they handle their finances, and every time they discussed it, they ended up fighting. Because her emotions were taking over at that point and definitely getting in the way of any kind of strategic or objective thinking, and with her permission, I asked her if we could shift back to her career for a little while in the conversation. I asked her to talk about a situation at work in which she had to present a challenging issue regarding the company's finances to the board, and then help the board come up with strategies to address the issue. She was able to do this easily. After she identified the strengths and skills she used to make that situation effective, I asked her to identify which of those she used when she talked about finances to her husband. When I asked her to do this, she quickly responded, no, that's different, Robin. And when I asked her why, she paused for about 30 seconds and then answered, I honestly don't know. Why don't I do that with my husband? The answer is pretty simple. We don't typically translate what we do well at work to our personal lives, but those same skills can be effective in both areas. So one of your takeaways could be that the next time you're dealing with a challenge in your relationship, when there's a misalignment in your communication or presenting a perspective that you have, see if you can tap into the professional skills you just listed on your paper and apply them to that situation with your significant other or spouse. Okay. Second part of the analysis. For this, we're going to do an organizational analysis. I want you to think about some of the organizations or companies you've been involved with. Again, either currently or in the past, in a professional career role or in a volunteer role. And I want you to list some of the structures within the organization that helped that organization be successful and effective. You might consider things like protocols that they use, ways that they enhance communication, ways that they made sure that they achieved their goals. So take 1 minute and just jot down some ideas of what you saw, what you experienced that made organizations you were involved with effective and successful. You have about 20 more seconds to jot down any ideas that you might have. Okay. So in your analysis, maybe you wrote down the implementation of the company's mission statement. Maybe you considered things like protocols for communication or for decision-making. You might have also considered things like KPIs, key performance indicators, to ensure that the company's goals were being achieved. What's interesting to me is that the things that make companies function effectively can also be applied to our committed relationships. What if you incorporated some of these strategies into your marriage or your relationship? Could they achieve the same level of success or support for your relationship as they do in business? The answer to these questions is yes. So we're going to play with this idea of creating a business plan for your current or future relationship. And we're going to talk about 4 strategies that you could consider implementing for your own relationship as part of the structure of your relationship business plan. And you can read these on the slide that's in front of you. And to start, we're going to talk about the mission statement that maybe some of you wrote down on your piece of paper when we were doing the organizational analysis. Most successful businesses and companies have an established mission statement that everyone within the organization is aware of. And if we were interactive, I would ask you why. Why even bother having a mission statement for your company or business? You likely could answer the questions pretty easily. The mission statement is something that clearly defines the purpose of the company, and it acts as the North Star for how the company is going to move forward. You likely see this mission statement posted in various locations around the company, or at least on the company's website. So this helps organize the members of that organization so they all know the direction that they're contributing towards. Guess what? A mission statement can do the same in a relationship. When I work with couples, my first question is always, what is their relationship mission statement? And maybe it doesn't surprise you that most couples don't have a mission statement. And none of the couples I've ever worked with had their mission statement written down. In all the business and psychological research that's out there, if something isn't written down, it isn't real. And it's not likely understood or known by all the players. What do I mean by that? As an example, a couple who recently started working with me said that they had a general idea of their relationship mission statement when I asked about it. They didn't have it written down, but they both said that the key parts were in their heads. So I asked each partner to write down exactly what was in their heads. When they compared their lists regarding the purpose and the direction for their relationship, they were shocked because what they saw was that there were some significant differences between their two ideas of their mission statement. This is why having a written mission statement is important to ensure that you as a couple are unified and moving in the same direction. So the biggest question I get asked is, what does a mission statement look like? How should it be? And there's no hard and fast rules around a mission statement, except that it should be pretty short, maybe 3 to 5 sentences at maximum, because it should be something that could be easily recalled. Maybe not verbatim, but at least most of the major concepts should be easily accessed when the couple is trying to remember what their mission statement is. So when you and your partner are sitting down to write your relationship mission statement, there are 3 things to consider: the why, the what, and the how. The questions around these are, why does the relationship exist? In essence, we're asking, what is the purpose of your relationship? The what is, what do you do as a couple to support the relationship and its purpose, to support the why? And the how do the things you do as a couple support the relationship? So some couples write their mission statement together. They sit down, they might have a nice glass of wine or water, and they come up with their mission statement together. But that's not necessarily what will work for you, because the other couples start by writing separate mission statements to gather their thoughts. And then they come together to share and discuss and compare their respective statements, eventually with the goal of blending their statements into one mission statement for the relationship. Once the couple has a unified statement, they decide where to post this statement. Now, no couple I know frames their mission statement and posts it in every room of their house like you might in a company building or a brick and mortar. Typically, relationship mission statements might be used as phone home screens or kept in the notes section on your cell phone. Another couple that I know had their mission statements on Post-its, and they would put them on or above their computers. Another couple laminated their mission statement, and they each kept a copy in their wallets. And probably the most creative one that I've worked with was the couple that I worked with who had their mission statement tattooed on their arms as a celebration of their 30th wedding anniversary. Now, I'm certainly not advocating that. There's no one right way to do it. As long as you can regularly see and read your mission statement, even if it's in your periphery, the mission statement becomes a tool to evaluate choices and decisions, both as an individual within the couple and as a unified couple. It's a reminder of the greater goal, which can often dictate next steps. The mission statement helps the couple evaluate whether a reaction, an option, or a decision aligns with the statement and then therefore benefits the relationship, or that it doesn't align and is contrary to the relationship and maybe shouldn't be done. Once you have your mission statement intact, the second strategy that I often talk to couples about is a definition of roles. So again, in your work life, roles are clearly, hopefully, delineated. Why? Well, people know their responsibilities. They're able to focus on their defined areas. Their energy isn't diluted because they're doing the tasks assigned to other people. And their roles are likely aligned with the activities they're good at. So how many of you have sat down with your partner or spouse to define your roles? Couples often disagree or argue because tasks fall between the cracks, or there's a disparity in how much one partner does versus the other. This can lead to resentment, blame, or dissatisfaction with the relationship. And for some couples, like the first couple I talked about in couples coaching, they get into a rut. Having clearly defined, articulated roles can avoid that. And I'll give you an example from my personal life. My husband is the CFO for our relationship. For those of you who aren't familiar with that acronym, Chief Financial Officer. He likes numbers. He likes math, which is beyond me. Two things I clearly don't like. Now, I can do all those things associated with finances. And in past relationships, I was actually the CFO without the definition of it. But I don't enjoy it. And it would take me longer to do than it does for my husband because he's really good with math and numbers. I can better use my energy and time on areas in our relationship that he doesn't like doing. That's why he's our CFO. Now, as CFO, my husband doesn't get to make all the financial decisions because what effective CFO makes unilateral decisions for a company? Instead, he oversees our finances, and in our monthly financial meetings, he presents the details and any potential decisions to me so that I can weigh in on them. The same is true with my role of COO, Chief Operations Officer. I'm really organized. I maintain the day-to-day operations within our home. I organize the schedule. I plan social outings. I'm typically the point person for the kids. Again, it doesn't mean he isn't involved. It just means that I am the lead in those areas of our life, and he supports those areas any way we see fit. So, who's the CFO and COO in your relationship? Who's the fleet manager who oversees the maintenance of your vehicles? Or who's the nutritionist or head chef that makes sure of the nutritional health for the family? This list can be extensive, but what's important is knowing who is the lead in every area of the life within your relationship. And it allows for the same smooth functioning as defined roles do for a business. You now have your mission statement and your roles defined as a strong foundation to incorporate the next strategy. This third strategy involves identification of pain points and how to evaluate progress in your relationship. In business, pain points are specific issues experienced by customers which inhibit the overall goals of the company. So when entrepreneurs or business leaders talk about pain points, it allows them to have a clear identification of challenges, and even more so, an opportunity for an objective discussion to determine strategies to alleviate those pain points and ultimately achieve the goal that they set out as a company. Tell me the last time you talked about a pain point in your relationship. Not likely. Most of us in relationship talk about problems. And in these conversations, you might identify things that the other person is doing that is annoying or frustrating or aggravating. My guess is that very often these conversations can become personal attacks. People take on a status of defensiveness, and then it creates an opportunity or an environment focused on individual blame. Not productive, not strategic. Think about if you and your partner discuss these issues as pain points, variables that detrimentally affect the relationship. This could facilitate a more objective conversation. And then you get to create strategies to address the pain points. I'll give you an example from another couple that I worked with to really illustrate what this can do. The husband's biggest complaint was that his wife never made time for them because, and I quote, "She's always so wrapped up with the kids." As you can imagine, the wife would get really defensive when he said this and often responded with something her husband did which annoyed her, and the communication would devolve into silence or a fight. So instead, we worked to describe the issue as a pain point. In this case, the pain point was lack of time spent as a couple. More objective, no blame, less emotional reaction. Once the pain point was identified, the couple needed to determine how to evaluate progress in this area to see if they were achieving the goal of strengthening the relationship. Couples will often say things to me like, "It just feels better, so we must be doing things right," or "Things seem better." So in business, can you ever imagine relying on feelings or intuition to monitor progress on goals? Of course not. And the same is true for your relationship. So to evaluate whether the pain point was being addressed, this couple defined key performance indicators, KPIs, to analyze their progress. There are two KPIs regarding the pain point of lack of time as a couple were date nights and daily no kid zones. They scheduled their date nights for each month and then tracked how many of them they actually went on. They also planned to sit with each other every day for at least 20 minutes without kids, and they tracked how many days a week they accomplished this goal. Essentially, this couple had a quantitative data through their KPIs regarding how they were addressing this pain point. There was no intuition, there was no feeling. They actually had numbers to support whether they were working on this pain point or if they missed the mark in a given week. Another common challenge that you might be familiar with in couples is a challenge around communication. Instead of the original manner of labeling the problem through blame statements like you always overreact and you always think you have the final say, a couple I worked with identified their pain point as explosive and dysfunctional communication. Pretty clear, pretty intense. So you can see how this pain point is objective versus personal. To address this pain point, they considered how communication was done in their respective work environments, just like the organizational analysis you just did. And they realized there was a protocol in both work settings for communication. So they implemented a 5-step plan for their communication, which included a safe word to be used when one of them noticed the communication was deteriorated and triggered an automatic timeout for both of them to collect their thoughts and decompress. And then they selected one KPI, which was days of effective communication, to know how effective their protocol was in reducing the pain point. At the end of each day, they did a quick check-in to analyze their discussions during that day and determine if their communication was effective. It took them about 5 minutes at most to say, yes, we did nail it. No, we didn't. And they used the parameters of 80% of their communication on a given day. If it was effective, that day counted towards the weekly tally for the KPI. Again, they had quantified data as to whether they were progressing or whether they had to adjust their strategy around that pain point. So this allows a couple to think objectively and strategically, which then leads them to create preventative protocols and avoid emotional reactions. Because remember, with couples coaching, we are looking about prevention and proactive approaches, not trying to band-aid or patch up a crisis in a relationship. The final strategy that I want to offer you for consideration in your current or your future relationship is to schedule regular reviews. Now, again, if we think into our professional lives, whether past or present, or in volunteer roles or in career, there are regular reviews. Your company likely does or did regular reviews every quarter. This is to make sure that they are hitting their goals and make sure that they are still on track because they don't want to wait till a crisis to do the review. You are also expected to go through an annual review of your role and contributions to the company every year. You get to determine how you are doing in terms of supporting the goals of the organization, and hopefully you get feedback on things that you're doing well and things that you need to improve upon. Overall, it helps you look at the strengths as well as the areas that could use some development. And ultimately, it's to allow the organization or you as the individual to reach your optimal performance level. So again, I have a question for you. When do you sit down with your partner to do your relationship evaluation? For many of the couples I work with, they don't. Or what they'll say to me is that, oh, well, yeah, when we go on dates, we talk about how we're doing. And I usually suggest that dates are supposed to be fun and an emotional connection, maybe a sexy connection for some couples. It's not a time to do an analysis because the analysis of your relationship, much like an organizational analysis or an annual performance review, is about strategy. It's not about fun. It's not about connection. And trying to blend those dilutes what is supposed to be happening on date night versus what is going to be happening in the business meeting for your relationship. So these are handled just like your reviews at work. You put them on your mutual calendars so that it is an actual meeting that you will be attending, barring any emergencies. You have a plan or an agenda of topics to discuss. Likely, and for many of the couples that I talk to, they review their mission statement to make sure it's still relevant, or whether they have to make some tweaks to catch it up to where they are in the relationship. You analyze your pain points and your KPIs. You establish your relationship goals for the next quarter. And each partner gets to provide a quarterly summary of their respective roles and responsibilities. Essentially, your relationship evaluation ensures that you and your partner have a regular check-in to identify issues before they become problems, just as you would in business. Now that you have your 4 strategies, I want you to consider the idea that ultimately, making business decisions based on reactivity or subjective emotions doesn't typically result in success. You wouldn't stand for it in your business life. And the same is true for your relationship. By creating a business plan for your relationship, you approach your relationship with a strategy for success. And you build on the compounding interest of the investment in your relationship. Thank you for having me, and I welcome any questions about some of our topics.
Okay, I'm going to look and see if we have any questions. Thank you so much. That was fantastic.
You're welcome, Julie.
I was writing frantically through the whole thing. So let's see. So while I'm waiting to see if there's any questions, I did have a question. So you mentioned quarterly. So do most couples meet quarterly for a review?
It depends on the couple. It depends how significant their pain points are. So I have had couples who decide that they're afraid that they're approaching crisis. So they decide to have weekly meetings on their relationship because they want to really stay on top of it. I think that the average is quarterly. And then I do have some couples that are in a really good flow. They've noticed they're in a good place. Their strategies are working, and they do bump it out to twice a year. I have not worked with any couples who decide to do it once a year. Too many things can happen in a year's time to let that go. So quarterly is the average. Bi-yearly is what I have heard. And then weekly, if the couple is in a place where they need more dedicated time to improve their relationship.
Okay. Great. Thank you. And then what about, so when couples do meet, do you find, how do you keep it from turning into a kind of he said, she said, argumentative kind of meeting?
So that's the beauty of starting with the mission statement. So if they have their mission statement right from the beginning, that allows anytime it starts to go in that direction, we go back to the mission statement. Currently, for example, a couple I worked with this morning, so we're on Zoom, they're actually in 2 different locations, and the conversation started to devolve into that he said, she said. And so I asked a question: is the current method of communication supporting your mission statement? They both got really quiet. The husband actually hung his head a little bit, and the wife pulled out the mission statement. She was holding it up to the camera. She's like, nope, we are not supporting our mission statement. And what she did is then because she likes to print out their business plan as we go, she flipped through and got to their protocol for communication. This was a different couple than the one I talked about. And she said, look, we missed step 2. That's where it started to fall apart. And the husband was looking at it on camera, and he said, oh, okay, let's start again. And then they walked through their protocol for communication, and the conversation continued. So these structures aren't just, words that we're saying. They are tools to make sure that as the couple is trying to do the work, it frames the conversations. It frames how they're thinking about each other and their relationship so that it doesn't start becoming that blame, guilt, shameful place that a lot of couples associate, for example, with couples therapy.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. We have another question.
Sure.
Have you ever tried SWOT analysis with couples? How does it work?
That's a great question. I have not done that yet. Thank you for the idea. What I try and do is me personally, and what I've found and what I've shared with Julie is right now I can call this a proprietary model for couples coaching because I've yet to find anybody who does it this way. And I think it's because a lot of people have a hard time at first saying, well, relationships or business are different. And I get to have a conversation about why they're not. So I don't do a cookie cutter approach with my couples, aside from the mission statement. Some couples really already have some processes in place, and I'm not going to walk them through a structured program just because. So I haven't yet had a couple in 8 years need a SWOT analysis, but now I really do appreciate that thought and taking a second look at it because it's been a while since I've considered that.
Great. And then finally, what about for families? Could this same philosophy be applied to a family system?
That's a terrific question. And the answer is yes. I've seen some families do it. What usually happens is a couple will take their approaches and then shift it to their family. So they'll start with creating a family mission statement, which I do think some families talk about or have, a general sense. Maybe even they write it up, but do they review it regularly with their family members, with the collaterals in their relationship? Because very often I'll talk about children or other people in the house as collaterals, because again, it's a more objective term than children, which has obviously so much personal connection and emotion associated with. Then they do build in, family goals and how are they evaluating the family goals? The delineation of roles really comes into play because sometimes the other members of the family, children or in-laws living in the house or whatever, take on some of those roles. And what it does is it allows the people in the family to know who's responsible, who's the person, the go-to person. Again, not that not if a child went running up to my husband and said, I have a question about this, he'd say, nope, sorry, go see the COO. That's not how this works. But it allows for, in this case, me to facilitate any of the communication. My husband might come and say, hey, one of our kids is having a problem in math and it's really, he or she is really struggling. And I'm the one that contacts the teacher to see if there's anything we could be doing differently. So it just increases a really high likelihood that the family is going to function really smoothly. Certainly not without exceptions, and things come up and there's no way to keep it 100% of the time smooth and successful, but it definitely ups the chances. And that's the whole idea behind this, that it may not guarantee certain areas of success, but it certainly ups the chances that there will be success because there's a plan. Julie, you know better than I think maybe anybody on this call that if there's no plan, success is less likely. And a plan ensures that you get as close to, if not fully achieve success. And that is true for relationships as well as finances.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think a lot of people probably think of the two separately, and maybe having a business framework in relationships might be, kind of taking the fun and mystery out of things. But it sounds like it's the opposite, where if you kind of have all of these systems set up on the side, that when you are together, you're more likely to just be able to have fun and not have all of these things.
That's the big pushback I get when people question this model, is that, no, relationships are about love and sexual attraction and fun. And I say, no, relationships aren't, because those things ebb and flow. And sometimes people feel like they're out of love or feel like they're out of sexual attraction. That's when the divorce rate tends to go up. The love and the sexual attraction and the fun are the bells and whistles that when you have a strong foundation, those are only going to get better because you're going to have plans and protocols. I had a couple, to be very candid, that had a protocol around their sex life because it was a pain point for many years before they came to work with me. And once the protocol was in place, it alleviated any question, any doubt, anything. And it allowed an opportunity that for their quarterly business meetings, they would have a conversation about things that were going well, things that were not. So their sex life, their physical intimacy actually improved when they had the structure built in to their business plan.
Well, it is such an interesting framework. And we absolutely appreciate your time today. You're always a wealth of information for us. And I'm going to share my screen once more because there's a slide here. If you'd like to offer any feedback, hopefully you can see this okay. Let's see, I can try to make that bigger. There we go. On the screen here, if you want to scan the QR code, if you have any feedback for Dr. Robin and her talk today on the subject or her presentation, feel free to go ahead and use the code. And I'm just going to say thank you again. It was wonderful to have you today and hope to have you back again.
Julie,
Thanks
thank you
for
so
everybody
much.
for joining us.
Have a good evening.